Well, we're so glad that you joined us today for the webinar. We're going to be talking in just a few minutes about ministry insurance. What a mess. Or some people say, what a dumpster fire right now. A lot of things going on probably in your ministry, your church, and we're going to help address those problems today and hopefully give you some really sound advice and options that you're going to be able to look at. I'm Dr. Rodney Agan. I'm the CEO. I'm the founder of Simple Ministry. And just basically, Simple Ministry exists to advance God's kingdom by serving churches, ministries, and nonprofits with the tools, the coaching, resources to support your vision. Over 35 years of ministry experience. We also work a lot in the marketplace with corporations and companies as a missionary to the marketplace. But under Simple Ministry, we're really here to help support you, not to get in front of your ministry, but to support it in every way we can. So I'm glad today to have a partner of ours, Michael Campbell. He is the president of Ministry Sure. And so, Michael, we're glad to have you on today. Take just a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself and Ministry Sure.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. Yeah, my name is Michael Campbell, and I've been in the church insurance space for 15 plus years, had a background in education, teaching, counseling, and missions work. And Ministry Sure is birthed out of our vision, mission, and purpose statement, which is supporting ministries and fulfilling its purpose in an uncertain world. Ministry Sure was started originally by Mr. William McBroom, who was a retired preacher and deputy insurance commissioner for the state of Georgia. His goal was to help pastors. That was the intent and everything like that. And so our vision, mission, and purpose at Ministry Sure, we wanted to align to serving the church. And so it's been a wonderful ride, and we are excited to serve hundreds of churches all across the Southeast in the area of risk management, wise counsel, and insurance placement. So yeah, that's
great. And these are areas that you're talking about that, as a pastor background, and as most that will probably listen to this, trained in, all of the theology and all of maybe typical pastoral kind of things. But the things that we're going to talk about today are totally outside of that scope. And so I know I've experienced it. I'm sure people today on the webinar have experienced it. But you're like, okay, about the time I figure some of this stuff out, it all changes again. So again, today we're going to talk about ministry insurance. What a mess. That's kind of the topic and the thought. And so what I'd love to do now is, Michael, just jump right in and begin to talk about what is insurance from a ministry church perspective, and just help us out.
Yeah. So broad strokes, insurance is transferring risk. So ministries don't have oftentimes $2 million sitting around to repair, replace, a building hit by a tornado, or hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend their reputation when and if someone decides to come after them. And so that's where we step in. It's basically we're standing behind you and supporting you, and you're providing us a few dollars in order for us to back you. And most ministries just need wise counsel and the ability to operate and not be operating in fear. And that's our purpose, is to be the guardrails to help you with wise counsel. And as far as insurance is concerned, what has happened in this last 4 or 5 years is we have seen so many changes, both socially, economically, and even when it comes to weather. I have a chart up here, and in 2023 we saw let me see, I'm just reading here, there was over $35 billion in losses just in the Southwest, Central, and Midwestern states. Wow. When it comes down to it, the last 4 years have been the worst of the past 60. Wow. And it's interesting, as these companies try to predict what's going to happen, they will have their predictive models and then add some. And each of the past 4 years, the losses have gone past their predictions, and they've
Wow.
built buffer past their buffer. And so that's what's going on. It's just every time that we think we've predicted or tried to we've tried to take account for the worst case scenario, it keeps going past that.
Yeah, and I love the fact, your approach with Ministry Sure is not just, hey, we're insurance agents kind of thing. Your approach is more, we're here really to be a coach consultant for risk management and a lot of things. And I was thinking about as insurance goes up price wise, obviously you have no total control over that, but you can help with the risk management so we can handle it. And I was thinking, man, it'd be great if the pastor could get in the church in the pulpit and go, hey guys, the bills have gone up. We need tithes to go to 12% starting this week, but they can't do
Yeah.
that. So
No.
you can help us reduce the risk side to make it work.
Yeah, and I will tell you, a lot of what we're trying to do is hold up a mirror
Mhm.
so you're aware of what the underwriter sees. A lot of us
Yeah.
love our home church, love, what we do in the community, and believe that that supersedes everything. We're a business, and the insurance companies are businesses. And so what they have to say is sometimes no. And that can be really painful process. So our goal is to hold up the mirror and then do our best once hey, look, we've got plumbing issues or we've got pastoral issues, we've got policy issues. What can we do about it with our limited budget, with our limited personnel? And that's where we come in to help you um, spiff it up, spit shine it up.
So why does this matter to your ministry as far as a pastor? Why does this matter?
Yeah. So here's the deal. In the past, there's been the market has been fairly soft. And with all of the unexpected losses and things like that, there's tremendous pressure on the insurance companies. Some people call them seeding companies. Those are the companies that are on the paper of your policy. So the Progressive, the Geicos, and then in the church insurance space, it would be the Brotherhoods, Church Mutuals, Guide Ones, all of those. Those are the fronting companies, and they're backed by the reinsurance companies. And the rating companies are also providing perspective to the reinsurance companies as to whether this company is capable of honoring their contracts, right? That's the contract, that's the insurance policy you have. Can the company actually honor their contract when you have a convective storm, when you have a massive freezing event or something like that? And the rating bureaus have not been kind.
Yeah.
They have not
Well,
been. Go ahead.
back in years past, we would just say, does your church have insurance? But there's a whole lot more to that now. So
Yep.
talk about some of the components of a typical ministry insurance policy.
Yeah. So, obviously the biggest part of most ministries is your property insurance.
Mm.
I mean, it drives 85% of the premiums. Um, in effect, you have a partial occupancy, or, a lot of churches meet a couple times a week, and then the rest of the week it's kind of vacant. Liability is not generally the biggest part of your policy. It's a massive property schedule. And so that's the first thing that carriers see. So first they go to property and they say, okay, is the church properly taking care of his assets, the things they've been entrusted with? Are
Yeah.
they good stewards of his property? And then once you get past that check mark, okay, are they taking care of, and I hate to say it that way, Rodney, but like they first look at the property and they say, well, if they're not taking care of the property, they're probably not taking care of the people,
Wow.
right?
Never looked at it from that perspective. It's great.
Yeah. So, check property. Let's go to the people and see if they're taking care of their kids. They have proper policies and procedures. They're managing their money well, those kind of things. And so the carriers really dig in and try to figure out, you know, is this ministry, is this nonprofit operating and showing good stewardship principles.
Yeah. So you got property insurance. What are some other
Yeah.
components?
So then the other side is the liability, which would be all about people, the casualty part of your policy. So you've got your workers' comp, which is for your staff,
Mm,
take care of your staff and the people that you employ. And then the liability would be we covering, people that are on your premise that you're directly serving, or volunteers that are considered part of your staff but not being paid. So that's where your liability piece comes in. And they also are looking at, where you're serving. So the different places you're doing co-ministry and all of those kind of things. Um, so you've got property, you've got liability, and then you have commercial auto, which, most of us have an auto policy. So that's pretty straightforward. A lot of exposure. Georgia in the Southeast is a tough place to drive.
yeah. Some of the you know, special type of things that we look at today that we didn't look at, before, liability on things in ministry that 25 years ago, I have a father who pastored for over 50 years. They didn't hear those things back then. Now today we have liability in other areas. What are some of those that you might
Yeah.
bring?
Yeah, what separates a church insurance policy from, say, just a ho-hum, you know, commercial policy would be, your reliance is so heavy on volunteers. And
Mhm.
so a good church insurance company is going to take that into account. They're comfortable with the exposure that is the volunteer that doesn't understand every piece of HR. You might have a volunteer board that's making HR decisions, financial decisions, property decisions, even contracts, right? Where in business, you might have a full-time administrator or an HR professional. That may be the case in the church, it may not. And so the company has to be that you're working with has to be comfortable in I'm going to say it, in the mess, right? They have to be comfortable in the chaos, which
Yeah.
is so, and then you have specific coverages like directors and officers. So if I'm going to sit on a board, just like you, Rodney, you sit on missions boards and church boards and all of those kind of things. And you have things to lose as you've been working, you've accumulated a house and cars and things like that. You want coverage for your directors and officers liability, which stands in the gap, right? It protects you as you make informed or attempt to make as good a decisions as you can on behalf of the church. And you want your assets protected.
Yeah. And in
Um,
today's world, like sexual misconduct, cyber is a huge thing now. I know. Talk about some of those kinds of things for a moment.
Yeah, yeah. So cyber liability is not necessarily indigenous to the church. Most of the folks, are not. That's not an area of concern initially until church is managing a lot of data, a lot of data associated with,
Yeah.
your congregants, perhaps your employees directly. And so all of those kind of things, you're storing data and you're responsible for the data that you store. Interestingly enough, the government has put a lot of compliance requirements on entities that are storing data. And so your job as a church is to make sure that that data is safe. And if it's not safe, then if you do have a breach or you do have a situation that you can make someone whole, right?
Now, I'll put a little plug or commercial here. We do have an upcoming webinar we're going to be doing with a cyber specialist that understands ministry and cyber security. And so that's something I hope we can help you guys with down the road. And I was thinking too, Michael, we work a lot in the space of pastors, staffs, and we do know that, I think 90 something percent of churches in America are less than 100 people. But
Mhm.
even though that you may be larger than that and you could be a megachurch, we know the trend is moving away from larger staffs to more volunteers because of budgeting constraints and all that. Now, what that does is it opens up the door for a lot more people to come in that you can do background checks, you can do all these things, but still things happen and you can't be all things to all people. So this is why, I think this is even more important to make sure that you're covered because you don't want to lose everything you have over some crazy person that acts outside of your policy. You know, yeah,
Absolutely. And I would say there's a couple things. Once again, we talk about standing the gap when Ministries do have lots of people. They're not all paid and they're not all necessarily specialists in what they're doing. They're asked to step in the gap and plug the gaps. And there's a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
So, you want carriers that are comfortable, in essentially the mess. So when we talk about a church, a carrier being willing to go to the wall to protect the reputation, if Rodney's going to volunteer his time at the missions organization, he makes an HR mistake,
Hmm.
or his name is listed because he decided to hire someone, and somewhere in that process, a background check was missed, and it went contrary to policy and procedure. You could be named as a church leader on a lawsuit, and you don't want to be bare by yourself, having to retain your own legal counsel and choosing to,
Yeah.
maybe sell your car so that you can get good counsel to protect your reputation from an abuse, molestation, liability, accusation, or a financial mistake
Hmm.
that may be well intentioned. It just happens.
Yeah.
That's where we step.
What are maybe the top 2 or 3 types of coverage that
Yeah.
we generally see, claims kind of thing?
Okay, so if we're talking about liability or property, so let's clarify. I want to
As a
start
church, doesn't matter, I guess. What kind of claims do you see?
with. So I will tell you, here in the southeast, it's wind, and some more wind.
Yeah.
We're working through a mentality shift, and this is the tough part because day one, you know, everything dies. People die, and so do buildings, roofs, all of those kind of things. And so I have a really close friend who's a roofer, and he told me, he's like, in Georgia, a good roof can repel any wind thrown at it, not hail, wind, right? But a bad roof can't repel anything.
Hmm.
So if we're talking about just something super simple like a 3-tab shingle, the lifespan's 15 years. At 12 years,
Yeah.
you're at the end. An architectural shingle, at about year 20, you start to see major degradation and integrity issues. It's
Yeah.
going to be difficult in repelling that exposure, protecting the building and all that's inside. So wind's a really big deal. And then, I don't know if you experienced this, but a lot of our ministries also experienced the fact that Georgia construction wasn't created for 8-degree weather.
Hmm.
Right. And so I experienced this. A lot of the things that we bring to light in our risk mitigation strategy guides and things like that, which, I'm happy to give away as we have conversations at a later date. But a lot of this stuff is birthed out of my own pain in my office,
Yeah.
where my office was improperly insulated. Right. I had a sprinkler system that wasn't functioning well. When I bought the office, I didn't know those things. And so we went through a whole remodel, and then we had a burst pipe, and
Hmm.
it caused a $45,000 claim. And I have a small space, not a church space that has 100,000 square feet. I mean, I have less than 2,000 square feet, and it costs $45,000 plus the disruption even to our little staff. So, a lot of our stuff is birthed out of our own pain.
I
And
knew a church that their pipe busted during the holidays when everybody was gone and nobody was there for almost 5 or 6 days. And by the time they got there, the sanctuary, the downstairs was flooded. They've been, had to move out of the whole facilities for about 6 months. So it's very big deal, I know. What other I know we can dig into that a little bit more too, and what kind of other claims?
yeah. So, and then I would say, you have wind, and then you have frozen pipes, plumbing issues. The next one down would be probably electrical issues. So, you have older churches, turn of the century churches, where the wiring is maybe old
Yeah.
tube, or, there's a bunch of different, older electrical panels. Perhaps things are cobbled together with extension cords and things like that, where, you know, uh, they're using churches, ministries might be using equipment, and the wiring isn't there to properly support the pull of energy that is needed, um, not being properly grounded. So from a property standpoint, that's a big deal. And then when you start to move over to liability, They're less frequent, but more catastrophic. So you would say the big one, abuse, molestation liability. Right behind it would be trips and falls, personal injury. And crazy enough, recently, um, there was a day I was going out to visit a ministry, and they had a car that all these computer systems, it must have gotten hacked. Something happened. The car just careened off the road and plowed into a church. And I finished that appointment. I got a second call to another church, which was 10 or 15 minutes away. And it wasn't exactly the same scenario, but it was another car hitting a church.
Mm.
You know,
Wow.
these are stationary objects. I don't even know how that's possible the same day to deal with two very similar claims.
Mhm.
Uh, Contours of the road that just drive people right into the church sign because there's inattention, there's texting, there's I'm going to say it, you know, some of these folks are driving down the road that are under the influence. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it is. So, you know, churches are, you know, been there for a long, long time. The roads even have changed. And so sometimes the roads just drive, if someone's not paying attention, they took the hands off the wheel. For some reason, the contours of the road take the car right into the church.
Yeah.
So, you know, um, so that from a liability standpoint, abuse, trips and falls, auto injuries, and then, you know, less frequent but more catastrophic reputational stuff,
Yeah.
copyright infringement, um, improper use of finances, embezzlement, all of those kind of things.
Mm. So I know probably if you're listening at this point in the webinar, you're either a pastor, ministry leader, or someone who's on a board, someone who's very concerned about making sure this is accurate. And ministry sure can overwhelmingly help you and understand that. And simple ministry would want to jump in to help in any way we can to help you begin to think about that. So I know there's a lot of let me call it in the weeds type of things that a lot of the you could talk about, you know, what are some of the factors causing the problems and the rate increases and cancellations. And there's a lot of things there. Probably as a pastor, most of you are going, I don't even know that I even have the bandwidth to figure all that out. What I want to know is how do I mitigate? How do I get out of this? And talk about just some of the cost, the increase, that
Yeah.
stuff. What is that looking like today in today's world?
So I would say one of the things we use is protecting your ministry's insurability. So the first thing when it comes down to it is knowing what the underwriter sees or having some sense of what the underwriter sees. It starts with that. And so I suggest to all ministries, if you're not sure, call your carrier and ask, hey, how did we look the last 5 years? Can you send us our claims report? We really need to dig in and see if any of those claims could have been prevented. You know, that's what it means to be a good partner in this is, you know, the expectation of your contract is, look, if something happens, right, that's out of your control, we're going to be there to catch you. You know, that might be you know, too much rain, weakening the roots, root, you know, the tree falls onto the roof, perforates the roof, there's water in the building. So, you know, that might be a scenario that could have been prevented because that tree was dying, right? And, you know, we just missed it. Maybe not, maybe so.
Yeah.
So that first step is knowing, okay, how do we look? And that claims history tells the story. Then we look at each claim and say, you know what? As an agent, I might say, you know what? Here's the things that the underwriter's looking at. You know, wow, you had an electrical fire. Maybe we need to replace the electrical panels because they haven't been, you know, looked at in 65 years. Or wow, like my office, you know, you had a frozen pipe and it burst in your ceiling. Maybe we need to insulate, right?
Yeah.
That area of the roof, you know? And so those are the kinds of things that are practical. What can we measurably do to ensure that that particular claim doesn't reoccur? One time won't kill you, but that reoccurrence will.
So in talking to you, you know, and I hear this with pastors as well, the cost of insurance in the last 3 or 4 years has just went through the roof. And so
Yep.
now it's becoming a larger piece of the budget pie.
Yep.
Well, 2024, you know, here we are, 2025 approaching,
Yep.
those kinds of things. So how, when you're looking at all that, just talk to us about the way premiums are looking. How does that affect us as an insurance policy holder kind of thing?
Okay, so I want to explain what the carrier, how they, when the money is collected, where it goes to. So
Okay,
there's basically
good.
three different parts, right? $1 comes into the carrier, right? And generally it takes somewhere between 30 and 35% to operate, okay? Then they have the profit margin, which they set aside for a rainy day, and that's somewhere between 4 and 6%. That's for the main church carriers because their margins are very low. The
Yeah.
rest of that money is set into a reserve fund to pay claims.
Hmm.
So it's really pretty darn simple,
Yeah.
right? Those three pieces are the big parts of this. Now, I want to just read some quick stats I've got right here. There
Sure.
are four main carriers in our area in the Southeast that are big players in the church market and probably control 80% of the market. You got Brotherhood, Church Mutual, Guide One, Southern Mutual Church. 2022, Brotherhood paid out 3% more than they brought in. Church Mutual paid almost 2% more than they paid in. Guide One paid almost 10% more than they
Wow.
brought in. Southern Mutual Church paid almost 10% more than they brought
Wow.
in. You can't do business that way. You
No.
can't stay viable. You can't honor your contract. That was 2022. 23, Brotherhood ran almost 13% more than they paid that they collected. Church Mutual ran 127%. So 27% more than they brought in. Guide One, 15% more. Southern Mutual Church, nearly 150%. Okay. You cannot stay in business that way,
No.
right? So we need partnerships. We need ministries to say, okay, we can't do everything, but we can do some things. And so this is a result. As I mentioned, the carriers kept saying, okay, here's where the losses were. Here's where our expected losses for the next year, and we're going to build buffer. And then, the actual goes beyond that, and every year they're doing this. And that's where the rate increases because we only have a few levers to pull, right? Our levers are, Rodney, we can change the part of the policy that you retain, which would be the deductible, right? We can change the rate, the cost of insuring primarily property,
Mhm.
or, the last thing is we just reduce our coverage offerings,
Yeah.
right? We narrow our forms to provide you less protection. Maybe we cut the wind coverage out.
Mhm.
Maybe we cut the water damage coverage out.
Yeah.
Some folks on the coast are having to make some really tough decisions right now. Can we afford wind?
Yeah.
And so that's where we go back to protecting your insurability. Our goal is to, one, hold up the mirror so you know what you look like. You may think you look like a princess, but you're not,
Not
right?
for filters, we can
You're
look.
not. Yeah, the filters are strong with this one. My goggles are real
Yeah.
thick. Um, and so first we show you who you are, what you look like to the underwriter, and then we say, okay, what do you have to work with? What resources do you have to work with? Both people, and finances. And let's just allocate some to take the top brushstrokes off and say, at least we're going to cover up the potholes in our parking lot and take care of making sure there's striping on the steps or making sure our rails are sturdy. That doesn't cost a lot of money. That just takes a little bit of elbow grease,
Yeah.
top level. And then we go down deeper. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're really helping us to see there are some things in the risk management. I don't think most of the time we don't consider that as a pastor. We're thinking about we got this catastrophes that could happen, so therefore I need this big policies, umbrella policies, all those kinds of things. But we don't realize we could mitigate a lot of that if someone just told us what to do. We have volunteers that could go do the painting on the steps or whatever, not going to cost. So, that's good. What do you see as, we're kind of winding this year out and the forecast coming up? Okay, most churches that I know are either in the middle or toward the end of their budgeting season, getting ready to budget again for next year. And it's almost like throwing sand up to the wind
Very
sometimes
much.
to do.
Very
So
much so.
give us some
Yeah.
help here, Michael. What are we thinking?
Okay. So couple things here. One, you might have you have buckets. Most of the carriers have buckets or profiles. And so it might be, wow, they take really good care of their property. Their roofs are all new. They've not had any claims. Well, that's your claims-free bucket, right? And those folks, if you've got a clean campus, you've done everything you can do, you've not had any claims, you're still bearing each other's burdens. That's what insurance is all about, right?
Mhm.
You're in a risk pool with everybody else,
Yeah.
and you're going to get the best bucket, which is probably going to be somewhere between 12 and 15%, right? And you're going to have to budget that every single year until we get out of this hole.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, if you're in the next category where you've got 2, 3 claims, if the carrier, and I'm just going to make this really clear, if you pull your claims history and you've had 2 or more property claims and they're different or a repeat of the same, my suggestion would be to give that carrier a call and say, hey, will you renew us? Will you be offering terms to us this upcoming renewal? So, and if you're in that bucket and you get a 20-25% increase, you need to give your agent or that carrier a hug.
Okay.
Okay. The last bucket is, oh man, I'm getting canceled.
Mhm.
And I have a guide for that and what to expect, and I can provide that to Rodney. We need to get to work
Yeah.
quick. And that looks like 2 to 3 times, sometimes more premium that you're paying currently if you're getting canceled. So I've had, we've helped 6 or 7 ministries specifically with cancellation in the last few months. And I'll give you some just quick overall pricing. One was a K-12 school, about 20 million in property, pretty big church, decent sized vehicle schedule. They were with Church Mutual. We're paying about 70,000 for their total insurance budget. And by the time we placed everything, we were nearing $350,000. Okay. So a lot of pain there. And unfortunately, because of the situation they were in, where they have an open liability claim, none of the standard carriers wanted to touch them,
Mhm.
nor would they give them abuse molestation liability. Super painful.
Wow.
And that's what we're talking about. Like basically, the main church carriers have been giving the churches a pass. But because now the rating bureaus aren't looking kindly at these carriers because they're they have a singular focus rather than a spread of the different types of entities that they're serving, they're being punitive, right? And so what's happening is they're saying, look, you're going to have to be quicker on the trigger to drop churches that just aren't managing their people or their property well. You're
Yeah.
going to have to give them a SWAT. Excuse my French. You're going to have to give them a discipline, right? You're going to have to discipline them. And that discipline looks like, hey, this isn't a fit. You're in this risk pool and you're putting the rest of the churches in your risk pool at risk
Mhm.
because you're not responding to good, wise counsel.
So, Ministry Sure, if you could give me a quick overview of I'm a pastor, I've got vehicles, I've got ministries, volunteers, staff,
Yep.
I'm getting really struggling. What is your elevator pitch, if you will? How can
Yep.
you help me?
Yep. So the first thing we do is our intake where we understand where you're at. We
Okay.
hold the mirror up. And then we talk about what resources you have to put into resolving the problem.
Okay.
And talk about that process of taking you from taking you and finding you an insurance home. And that comes down to, hey, what are the 10 things that we need to work on right now so that when that loss control person comes out from the carrier, they don't have to address the loose rail or the
Yeah.
sprinkler system that hasn't been inspected in years or that old electrical panel or whatever that is.
If I'm understanding you correctly, which honestly, I'm just now catching this part. This is really good. before the insurance underwriter comes to look at my property, Ministry Sure is going to say, kind of like a realtor, I want you to get all these things looking this way so that you're in better shape when they approach and come. That's great. I love that. Okay.
Yep. Our
What's
goal is
next?
to market you, right?
Yeah,
We're basically trying to help you
great.
position you in the best possible light to the underwriter before I go and initiate the markets.
Yeah, very good.
So yeah, that's our goal. It's very, we've seen some really wonderful things that have come out of this process.
And one thing is good too with Ministry Sure, you are not just representing an insurance company. You are looking at the whole to see where and where when each one of the pieces of the puzzle could fit, because every ministry is so totally different. Even though they may be 1 mile down the street from each other, they're completely different in their needs. Uh,
Yep.
that's
We
good.
we like to say that we're comfortable in the complicated and the simple.
Yeah,
And also, we will find a care that matches you,
yeah.
and we will mirror your efforts. So if you care about your property, your people, and your ministry, we will as well.
So making sure we know how to get in touch with you. Talk about that. How do we get in touch if someone has questions with like a risk management, anything?
Our website is ministrysure.com. We've also posted a number of links and things like that, and will on Simple Ministry and Connexus. And yeah, ministrysure.com. There's a button that says, schedule a consultation and a quote. It may not come down to that. I'm happy to chat with you at any time. And, my email is mike@ministrysure. And every email that we send out, when I reply back to you, you'll have all of my contact information, including my cell phone. So we're happy to help and jump in.
So as I told you in the beginning of the webinar, Simple Ministry is partnering with Ministry Sure to provide a lot of these resources that we believe the ministry needs. And so as you can connect with him there, we'll also have it available if you want to go to simpleministry.org and look at the resources there. We'll connect you to Ministry Sure. In coming days, we're going to be rolling out various kinds of webinars around a lot of different topics and things. But for instance, as I mentioned earlier, we hope to do a cybersecurity webinar, one on plumbing of a great partner that you and I both know well, and they do phenomenal work in that area and even mitigating churches before they start having all these major issues, which helps their insurance company to go, underwriters, hey, you've already taken care of this. So that's good. And electrical, we may have someone on to kind of talk about that. A lot of churches were built years ago, and now we're in a different day. That's good. And HR, I have a really good friend who is phenomenal in this space and can come on and talk to us a little bit about some things we can do there. Counseling, digital marketing. There's a lot of things that we're going to be bringing to you in these webinar series that we're doing through Simple Ministry. So any last thoughts before we go today?
Yeah, what I would say to you is don't wait, and know what you look like to the underwriters. In this time, we can't procrastinate. You need to protect your insurability. And if you know there's a known problem, especially when it comes to property, plumbing, electrical, or roof, don't wait. Get right on it, and then also provide documentation to whoever you're working with, because they need to advocate for you in these times.
Just like when we know we have a physical problem, we can keep acting though it's not there. But until we go to the doctor, we're not going to really know what it is and understand it well and then how to treat it. And the longer we wait, generally, the more severe the treatment is. And so I would, especially it's a no cost. It's an opportunity for you to go directly to these guys and get maybe a risk management guide or some advice and those kinds of things. And I know them well enough. They're more of a servant heart. So even if they don't do business with you, they're going to serve you. They're going to find ways to help you. And that's not necessarily common everywhere you go. So I appreciate that. Michael, thanks for being on today in the webinar. And again, if you want to reach him at ministrysure.com, Michael at ministrysure.com, or us at simpleministry.org, would be glad to talk to you. Have a great day, and we hope to serve you in some capacity.
All right.